Imagine, for a moment, walking through the bustling streets of Nuremberg in the summer of 1828. The clatter of horse hooves on cobblestone, merchants calling out their goods, children playing in the square. And then, suddenly, you see him. A boy no more than 16, stumbling forward with an unsteady gait. His clothes are ragged, his eyes wide with confusion, and in his hand, a letter addressed to the authorities. Who is he? No one knows. He cannot speak properly, only muttering. A few broken words. He barely eats, refusing bread but strangely craving only water and raw vegetables. The townsfolk gather around in awe, whispering that he must be a wild child, a feral boy raised in darkness. Some even wonder if he has been sent from another world. This was Kaspar Hauser, the child of Europe, the boy without a past. Found as if conjured from thin air, he carried no history, no memory, only a strange presence that unsettled everyone who met him. Over the years, Kaspar's story would twist into a labyrinth of mystery, conspiracy, and bloodshed, ending with his violent and puzzling death. But who exactly was this boy? A forgotten prince? A cruel experiment? Or merely a fraud who deceived an entire city? Tonight, we step into the chilling shadows of 19th century Germany to uncover the enigma of Kaspar Hauser. So, are you ready to walk with me into the mystery of the child who seemed to appear from nowhere? To understand the shockwave that Kaspar Hauser's arrival created, we must first step into Germany in the early 19th century. This was a land not yet united, but fragmented into dozens of small kingdoms and duchies. Rival dynasties guarded there, thrones with jealousy, noble houses clung to their bloodlines, and every rumor of succession could ignite political fires. Nuremberg, the city where Kaspar appeared, was no ordinary backdrop. Once a proud, imperial free city of the Holy Roman Empire, by 1828 it had become part of the Kingdom of Bavaria. It was a place where merchants, craftsmen, and soldiers intermingled, a city at the crossroads of trade and politics, but also one where superstition and gossip thrived. This was an era obsessed with origins and legitimacy. Bloodlines meant everything. To be a true heir could mean a crown. To be illegitimate could mean exile, or worse. Against this tense stage, the sudden appearance of a boy with no past and strange mannerisms was more than just curiosity. It was a potential threat. The boy's strange behavior added fuel to speculation. He walked like someone who had never seen daylight, stumbling as if the ground itself was foreign. His pale skin seemed untouched by the sun, his hands soft, almost unused, as though he had never worked a day in his life. And the letter he carried only deepened the riddle. An anonymous message claiming he had been raised in captivity, cut off from the world. Whispers began to spread. Could he be the lost heir of the House of Baden, hidden away to remove him from succession? Or was he simply a poor soul, the victim of a cruel imprisonment? The people of Nuremberg debated endlessly, their imaginations running wild. Newspapers seized the story, and suddenly, Kaspar Hauser was no longer just a boy. He was a sensation, a symbol, a puzzle that demanded answers. But behind the fascination lurked fear. If he truly was of noble blood, then his very existence threatened powerful figures. And in the politics of 19th century Europe, such threats were not tolerated. On May 26, 1828, Nuremberg's quiet routines were shattered by the sudden appearance of a teenage boy. He seemed lost, bewildered, as though he had stumbled out of a dream. His name, he claimed, was Kaspar Hauser. Beyond that, his story unraveled like something out of a Gothic novel. The letter he carried, crudely written, stated that the boy had been raised in complete isolation. From his own fragmented words, a chilling picture emerged. Kaspar said he had spent his entire childhood locked in a dark cell with only a straw bed and a few wooden toys. He was fed bread and water by an unseen hand, never seeing the light of day. Until suddenly, he was released and left in the streets of Nuremberg with instructions to join the cavalry or be taken in by strangers. The public was fascinated. Who could endure such a childhood and survive? His awkward gait, his limited speech, his strange diet, raw vegetables and water seemed to confirm his tale. He was called the Child of Europe, a living mystery that captivated scientists, politicians, and ordinary people alike. Kaspar's education began under the guidance of local teachers, who tried to transform the boy into a functioning member of society. Astonishingly, he learned quickly. Within months, he could read, write, and express himself with clarity. His gentle manners and almost childlike innocence won over many. To some, this was proof that he was not a fraud, but a victim of something far darker. Then came the rumors. Whispers spread that Kaspar might be the missing Prince of Baden, the rightful heir hidden away so that another branch of the family could rule. The theory was intoxicating. The idea that this ragged boy might be of royal blood set fire to the imagination of Europe. But royal secrets are dangerous currency. If Kaspar truly was a prince, powerful enemies would stop at nothing to silence him. The boy's life became a cycle of fascination and danger. In 1829, barely a year after his discovery, Kaspar was found in his tutor's home with a deep head wound. He claimed a masked stranger had attacked him, muttering threats before disappearing. Some dismissed it as an accident or even self-inflicted, but others saw a warning. Someone wanted Kaspar silenced. Despite the attack, his fame only grew. He was taken into the care of wealthy patrons who viewed him as a living curiosity. Crowds gathered to see him, scientists studied his every move, and newspapers printed endless speculation. Kaspar was no longer just a boy. He was a symbol of innocence corrupted, of political intrigue, of the eternal question, who am I? But his story would end in blood. In December 1833, Kaspar staggered home one evening with a mortal stab wound to his chest. He claimed a stranger had lured him to a garden with the promise of secret information about his origins, then turned on him with a dagger. 3 days later, at only 21, Kaspar Hauser was dead. The city mourned, but also questioned. Was this truly murder, or had Kaspar inflicted the wound himself in a desperate attempt to keep attention upon him? Even in death, he refused to give up his secrets. An autopsy revealed little, no definitive proof of his royal blood, no clear answers. His grave in Ansbach carried a haunting inscription. Here lies Kaspar Hauser, a riddle of his time. His birth was unknown, his death mysterious. To this day, his story lives on as one of history's most unsettling enigmas. A boy who claimed to be raised in darkness. A figure caught between innocence and deception, between truth and legend, and a death that sealed his fate in whispers of conspiracy. Was Kaspar Hauser truly a lost prince, a tragic pawn in a dynastic struggle? Or was he merely an impostor who wove a web of lies too complex to escape? The world may never know. But the silence he left behind is perhaps more chilling than any truth. Kaspar Hauser's short life did not end with his death. In fact, the true storm began after he was buried. His story spread far beyond Nuremberg, whispered in courts, debated, in salons, and sensationalized in newspapers across Europe. He became a symbol, a riddle that demanded interpretation. To many, Kaspar was a tragic victim. Intellectuals, poets, and philosophers saw in him the embodiment of innocence corrupted by a cruel society. They imagined him as a pure soul, untouched by the outside world until thrust into the chaos of politics and ambition. Writers compared him to a modern-day Rousseauian figure, proof of man's innate goodness, destroyed by the greed of power. But others were not convinced. Skeptics dismissed Kaspar as a fraud, a cunning impostor who spun lies to win sympathy and fame. His rapid progress in education fueled suspicion. How could a boy raised in darkness learn to read and write so quickly? Was his story of a hidden cell a carefully constructed fantasy? To these critics, his final wound was the ultimate deception, self-inflicted in a desperate bid for attention, ending in tragedy. The political debate was even sharper. If Kaspar truly was the missing Prince of Baden, as many suspected then, his life and death exposed the ruthless lengths to which dynasties would go to protect their thrones. Supporters of this theory pointed to the mysterious attacks against him and the secrecy surrounding his final days. To them, his stabbing was no random crime. It was assassination, a silencing of truth by those who feared it most. The case divided society. Scientists studied his behavior to argue about the nature of memory and development. Politicians whispered of conspiracy. Common people spoke of him as though he were a fairy tale figure, a boy stolen by shadows, returned only to be consumed by them again. Even in the decades that followed, Kaspar Hauser remained an obsession. Books were written, plays performed, paintings made in his image. He became less a person than a myth, a canvas onto which each generation painted its own fears and desires. Was he proof of human resilience or of human deceit? A warning about the dangers of power or about the perils of gullibility? His story left scars on the city of Nuremberg, too. For years, visitors flocked to the sites connected to him: the square where he first appeared, the house where he was kept, the garden where he was fatally stabbed. His grave became a place of pilgrimage, not just for locals, but for Europeans who sought to stand before the riddle carved in stone. The debate has never ended. Each new piece of evidence, letters, testimonies, even DNA tests centuries later, has only deepened the enigma. Like a mirror, Kaspar's story reflects back whatever people wish to see: innocence, conspiracy, fraud, or tragedy. And so, nearly 2 centuries later, his shadow still lingers. He is not just a boy lost to history. He is the embodiment of mystery itself. Nearly 2 centuries have passed since Kaspar Hauser staggered through the streets of Nuremberg, clutching a letter that claimed he had no past. And yet, his shadow still haunts us. His name surfaces in books, films, and even modern forensic debates. DNA tests have been conducted to determine whether he was truly of royal blood, results that remain inconclusive, feeding the fire of speculation rather than extinguishing it. Why does his story endure? Perhaps because Kaspar embodies questions that remain as unsettling today as they were in 1828. Who are we without our past? How much of identity is truth, and how much is the story we tell others and ourselves? And most haunting of all, how far will those in power go to bury an inconvenient truth? In our age of misinformation, hidden agendas, and conspiracies that ripple across social media, Kaspar Hauser feels eerily modern. His life was a battle between fact and fabrication, innocence and manipulation, a battle that mirrors our own struggles to separate reality from illusion. When you walk through the streets of a city today, surrounded by countless faces, how many of them hide stories we will never know? How many secrets vanish into silence, just as Kaspar's did? Kaspar Hauser remains what his gravestone proclaimed: a riddle of his time. But perhaps he is also a riddle of ours. So tell me, what do you believe? Was Kaspar Hauser a lost prince, murdered for his bloodline, a victim of cruelty, destroyed by shadows, or a master of deception who wove his own legend? The answer, like the boy himself, may forever remain in the dark.